Welcome to the Call to Farms podcast. Hi, my name is Tim Ng, and I'm joined today with my lovely wife, Sophie.
Hey, everyone.
And today we are so excited because we get to interview Lacey and Drew Grim with SchoolHouse Life. Having spent nearly 20 years with a focus on getting back to basics, Lacey and Drew Grim use regenerative, permaculture, and biblical farming principles to enhance their property while helping those around them do the same. Podcasters, community food club organizers, natural health educators, and parents, the Grims of the SchoolHouse Life and Farm offer workshops, events, and online tools sharing their love of plants, animals, homeschooling, entrepreneurialism, and natural medicine in hopes that their successes and failures may help those who need ideas and encouragement. Lacey and Drew, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a mouthful. Well done. We are so excited to have you guys on the show and really just to continue talking because the last time you guys had interviewed us for your podcast and we could have just kept going for another 3 hours, I think.
Yeah.
We're going to have to schedule family vacations together. Yes, yeah. And we're not that far away from each other.
Not that far. We're really not. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you and I were messaging before. We're going to have to plan a trip when we go to visit Reverend's Farms because Lacey and Drew are close by. Now that he's down the road. That's amazing. So we always kick off and start our calls and interviews with answering this question. What was it that made you answer the call to farms?
Oh, we get this question a lot. I'll let you answer.
I would say in an effort to connect with biblical ideas on a deeper level. So when you look at a lot of the Old Testament, you know, the fall holidays, the festivals, everything in the Bible is based off of agriculture. And we really wanted to kind of look at the idea of what would it look like to have a lamb on Passover or, plant different crops at different times. And that just kind of led us down this rabbit hole of looking more and more into all of the agricultural elements of the Old Testament and how we could participate in them.
Yeah, I think we felt like we couldn't really fully understand it unless we at least had some understanding of what it was talking about. Like with Passover coming up, one of the things to determine when it's time is to tell if the barley is aviv, which means ready, ripe, essentially. And we're like, well, I don't even know what a barley plant looks like. So how would we possibly know? And I think by nature, both of us are not willing to just accept someone telling us what to do. So we're like, okay, fine, but I need to know why, so we weren't really happy with somebody saying, well, the barley was aviv, just trust me on that, so we really wanted to just have a better understanding of what all those measurements meant, from the new moons to the, monthly cycles and the harvest and all of those things. I think it obviously isn't all equally from, Israel to the United States and our zone, but there is a lot of overlap and we've learned so much. And obviously now we're hooked on farming. Anyway.
That's really fascinating. We have talked to several people before and we've come from the nutrition side down to actually finding out, following the way and the biblical perspective of farming. And it's so funny because we didn't even talk about this before on your podcast or even before this call, but we had just celebrated Passover last night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We follow the Enoch calendar.
Yeah. And so it's really fascinating. It's our third Passover, but it's been really fascinating to learn how really the regenerative farming, the way that we're calling it now and how it's a really hot topic in the world of homesteading and farming really is kind of ties back to the biblical ways of agriculture and how we had farmed in the past.
Yeah, finding those intersections is really interesting. I think especially within permaculture, 7 is sort of the magic number. And that's also, a very straightforward biblical kind of prophetic and important number. And so it's really interesting how when you start noticing the natural systems and really implementing them and making them a part of your day to day, what the Old Testament outlines is just, it makes so much more sense. It's like, oh yeah, no, this fits like a glove. And without that out of context, I think it feels very unattainable and very almost irrelevant in a lot of ways. But we found it, of course, to be much more relevant than we would have without, getting our fingernails dirty and doing it a bit.
So how was that transition for you when you first started exploring the biblical perspective of farming and then doing it yourself. Have you planted barley?
Yeah, actually we did. And we do continually because we kind of put it out into our pastures for grazing and things. We haven't planted a significant amount so that we can harvest and then reap the grain and use the grain. We probably will in the future.
We did 1 year.
Did we?
And then we were like, we're never doing this again because it's so much work.
It's very intensive.
Like, we got the idea and we were like, okay, we get the idea. Like, we don't need to grow barley every year.
Most grains are very intensive and you need a lot of equipment. And we were like, I don't know that I want to be a grain farmer. I just want to have it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was your background before? Have you guys been in farming before? About your family before that?
No, so it's interesting. Like, we're both, I would say, first generation farmers. And we started like growing in our apartment in college, like on the steps of the apartment in pots, and kind of worked our way up into a city lot. We both have like farming genetics, I would say. Like, my great-grandfather my great-grandfather had like a big cattle ranch in South Dakota, but I didn't, really put that together until much later.
My grandfather was a dairy farmer. And so I grew up going to the farm and, of course, had fond memories. But I think every time we would talk about doing this kind of lifestyle, my mom would be like, why would you do that? What's so much work? Why would you do that? That would be the feedback I'd get.
Yeah.
So I think there's always like that skipped generation potentially of like, no, taking it for granted and maybe being a little resentful. And we'll see what our kids do.
But I do think like as we explored it, we started like realizing how, kind of like you guys, we realized how polluted the food system was and how corrupt it was. And even from like an ethics standpoint of like how animals are raised, I would say we kind of lean more heavily on the livestock side than veggie side. So, like being aware of how animals are treated and raised and, our responsibility to those animals really kind of kept us like, we went down that path also.
I think also we get to see, so first of all, part of the regenerative thing is like you kind of mentioned is regenerating health and that's a huge element. So you kind of become obsessed with how clean can I get my food to be, right? But then looking at the property that we have, I think part of the game for us is really how do we get this property to the place of abundance that I think that the earth has to offer, right? Like the fullness of what nature has to give us. And it has a lot to do with like undoing a lot of the things that have happened over the years. And so, when we use the word farming, it's kind of one of those words that I'm like, I don't know if we qualify as farmers. We have animals, we have, we grow things, we do things, but we don't make a living from what we do here in terms of what we grow, animals or vegetables. But we really want to, it's sort of like building equity in a home. Like we really feel like we're building equity in the property and the roots are growing deeper and the soil is richer and, things grow better and easier. And so like, there's a lot of investment in that we bury. And now somebody recently said, oh, you guys should invest in Bitcoin or, it's always this, that, or the other. Right. And I was like, I'm burying all my money. Not literally, but every money I have goes somehow into this property and making it better because that does, I think, pay dividends and hopefully will for generations. We'll see.
So you don't call yourselves farmers, but I understand you teach others to be more self-sufficient. You want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
So a lot of it started in 2020 when people like kept coming to us and saying like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Like, I remember our brother-in-law was like, hey, I'm thinking about buying flour from the local mill and I'm thinking about growing some plants because the grocery stores are going empty. And he like listed off all these things. I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And then I was like, wait, we already do all that. It was like, that was already our lifestyle. And so like more and more people kept asking like, and we were like, you know what, let's share this knowledge and share this experience. And kind of like, so went from there to, we did like an online summit with other homesteaders and like, worked towards like helping other people understand this lifestyle really and what it means to like know where your food comes from and grow your own food.
Over the years, we've seen so many people come into homesteading and then within a few years, they burnt themselves out and moved on to the next thing. And I totally get it. It's a hard way of life, but it doesn't have to be quite as hard. And I think especially if you're willing to learn from other people's mistakes, we're not as young as we used to be. So anyone starting this at our age, like, you got to skip a few steps, right? So some of the steps that we did, you don't start there, right? Like, we had enough energy to make it work and keep going. But, you know, there's just like a lot, I think, of failures and then successes. And we can help people know, when you talk about investment, like, the best thing you can do on your property is sit back and observe it and really see what's going on and how you can work with the systems that exist. And secondarily, plant perennials and water those perennials deeply and get the deer off of those perennials. And those are the things that, you know, I wish we had done to start with, because now we'd be in a much different place. But, you know, you kind of like do a little of this and a little of that, you know, like, you get all the animals and you do all the fencing, and it's like it's too much and you wear yourself out. So our goal is really to just help people whittle out all of the information, because, you know, you go to YouTube and you can learn how to do everything in an hour or less. But that doesn't mean you should. And also, one of the huge elements is, you know, what makes us successful is we have a very tight knit community of people around us. And we're really focused on, okay, how can we support our community? Does that mean we have this food club that we run? And so we pull everybody who's growing stuff together in order to have the food in the one place, so that, you know, the people who want that super hyper clean food come to this one place and create these bonds of networking. And, you know, that's really where self-sufficiency comes in, is when you can live like that.
Yeah, that's something that I really admire about you both, because last time when you had us on your show, you mentioned how you've been doing homesteading for so many years. It wasn't just 2020 or some of those events that happened, and just your passion and teaching others right now. That's just so amazing. And you mentioned community, and that's something that's really big with us. That's what really encouraged us to homestead. How did you find your community?
Good question. How did we?
I would say it's been over a long time, you know, over the decades at this point.
Well, we are entrepreneurs too. So there's an element of, like, you need to be able to meet your community and network and get to know people and serve your community in order for any business to work. So there was an element of, like, making a business work required that anyways. And then when 2020 hit, we were like, okay, now we're like, how do we create something how
do we connect all the networks that we have into one network?
Yeah. So we did a couple of things. One is we started a homestead mastermind. So every month we would get together with people in the area, and we did that for 2 or 3 years. And then we also started a market. And so the market is, you know, a place for all those homesteaders and others to kind of pool all the things that they have, whether it's eggs or veggies or milk or whatever they make. Anyway, so that's been, I think.
But I think before that, it was really like just looking for ingredients, you know, like milk was one. It was like, you know, where do you get milk from? And Lacey did a really good job, because we were homeschooling. You know, she was connecting with other homeschool moms, and moms tend to have more of a passion, I would say, about what their kids are eating, what their family's eating. And, you know, they got to talking, and it just kind of developed naturally from that. But there was definitely intentional networking also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's great. So you moved from the city and you bought the farm. Tell us about what you have going on. And has it been always this farm, or did you start smaller and grow into what you have now?
Yeah, like Drew said, we really got hooked on growing things with just pots on the stoop. And then we had a townhouse for a little while, and when we were there, I had a baby. And so we were already thinking, okay, can we buy a house? I don't even know. At the time, Drew was working at Walmart. So it was like, I don't know. But it was 2005. So we were able to get a loan.
They were giving loans.
They were like, anybody can want a loan. You want a loan? You want a loan?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was a part of that. I became a lender in 2006. It's like, you get a loan and you got
I remember us qualifying.
We're like, there's no way they let us. We just like, yeah, they did. Anyway, I mean, it worked out well for us in the end. But we knew when we were buying that property that we wanted full sun in the backyard and area to put gardens in. So we did have a 1/4 of an acre, and we grew that to the point where we were actually selling at farmers markets, and we had chickens and we have bees. And then in 2012, we were like, okay, we're bursting at the seams here. We had more kids, and the house was small, and the yard was small, and the neighborhood was
our real estate
not exactly up and coming.
Our real estate agent thought we were crazy, because when we would like look at a house, we would like walk straight in the front door and out the back door into the garden or to the backyard and be like, okay, can we have a garden? Like, we don't care about the house. We can fix whatever's wrong
How's
with
the
it.
sun?
Yeah, how's the sun?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we noticed too when we were looking for homesteads and working, and we're in real estate. So we know what we're looking for, but we're hoping to find somebody who could help us guide us to our first homestead property. But there really isn't anybody who could really help us. Of course, now the homesteading realtor.
I was gonna say, now we got Taylor, right?
That's right. And that's cool. You went right to the backyard, and I understand you do permaculture design.
Yeah.
On one right there.
That's right.
Yeah. At that point, we weren't really we didn't know much about permaculture.
Before we had furniture at the house that we're at now, we were laying on the floor taking Jeff Lawton's permaculture design course. So like that was like, we moved here and we're like, okay, we got to maximize the space and use everything efficiently. And it was like mind blowing, and we've been implementing ever since. And I mean, I think too, it's one of the big things that we have to offer when we meet with people. We'll do audits with people on their homesteads and help them maximize their properties. And they're just, I think like we're so used to thinking about boxes and squares and, you know, looking at veggie gardens as like these long rows. And when you start thinking about like blowing all of those rules out of the water and starting in like a more natural, organic way and thinking, okay, first of all, stop and wait, look at the way that your property moves already, and then watch where you build footpaths naturally, and then build your gardens around that. Let those be the edges. Like it's this whole new way, this whole new frame on which to build that I think people really enjoy, because it's so far from what we're, you know, we tend to think of like in a master gardener's workshop. They're going to be like raised beds, squares, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's more than one way to do this. I don't know.
So yeah, that sounds, I love it. We could talk about permaculture and gardening and using the best use of space for your garden.
Yeah.
But so you had the 1/4 acre. Where did you go from there? Because you said you were bursting at the seams. I'm really amazed. You had the chickens you already were selling at the market garden, and you had bees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then we found the property that we bought. It was a foreclosure. So we like put in this bid. It was this very strange system of like, you put in a bid and then see who has the highest bid. And anyway, it wasn't like an auction exactly. It was some kind of foreclosure.
It was like a blind bid.
Yeah. So you didn't get to know what other people were bidding. You just hoped yours was high enough to win. And we ended up winning. The house was disgusting. It was like an animal kennel, and it was a ranch, which I specifically did not want. And there's a lot of things that I didn't love.
We had dreams of like a farmhouse, you know, like a old 1900s farmhouse. And
we had some fall through.
We actually had like, we're sitting at one getting estimates for windows at this one farmhouse. And then like this guy showed up and he's like, what are you doing here? I just paid cash for this house. It's mine. And we were like, what?
Yeah, we'd already signed paperwork.
Yeah, like
devastating.
Yeah, he had like done it the night before or something, you know, like
it was devastating.
So there was like a couple of like fall throughs like that. So we were kind of like, if we don't get land soon, we're just never gonna get land. So
we had literally resolved to just getting an RV and leaving the house behind and just traveling. That's what we were gonna do. I was like, it's not meant for us. We're moving. And yeah, see, it was a good idea. Anyway, but we ended up, two separate people sent up me the link to this property. And I was like, I hate it. I don't want it. But Drew was like, well, let's just drive out and see it. And as soon as we got here, we walked around, we looked at everything, and I just started crying because it was not what I wanted. And I knew we were going to somehow end up getting it. And we did.
What year was that?
That was 2012.
That was 2012. Okay. So you've been there for quite some time, like 12 years now.
Yeah.
So what kind of changes have you made on the property since then?
Oh my goodness.
We've cut down all the trees.
Almost all the trees.
We just keep cutting them. There's always more trees.
When we bought it, it was like, I mean, like Lacey said, it was a foreclosure inside and out. So like the outside, like there's a 1 acre pond on it, but like from the house, you couldn't see it because there's so much wooded area.
Overgrown.
And everything was overgrown. It was never a farm, you know. It was like, I say at this point, it was kind of like a redneck paradise back in the woods.
Yeah.
And we were like, all right, we'll turn this into a homestead. And yeah, I don't know, like now, if
I looked at this property with someone, I'd say it'd be worth another $100,000 to get something better. Yeah. But you know, sweat equity.
So we slowly cleared out the trees. Pretty immediately, we like had all the trees on the south side of the property
Well, we couldn't move into the house either because it was in complete and utter disrepair, so that we couldn't actually get a loan until the work had been done. And I don't exactly know how all that works, but we had like this short period of time that we had to get it all done or they wouldn't let us have the loan. And anyway, so we had to live in a camper on the property and when I say camper, it was like a 70s camper that was not remodeled.
Probably like 200 square feet.
Yeah, it was bad.
With 3 kids?
Yeah.
3 kids.
3 kids.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it was August in North Carolina. So there was a lot of like downside. But here we are to live and tell. And yeah, we've done a lot to the property. It is on a nice hill, so we have a lot of ability to kind of use swales and things to catch water. And it really isn't, it's a permaculture dream, really. But I was so glad we took that permaculture class because there's nothing about this property that's flat. It's not like it was not ready to farm when we moved in. But since we moved in, we actually did buy the property that was at the front of our driveway as well, which is where we're sitting right now. It was another gut job, but it came with 5 acres. So that's been a huge help for us as well because it was acreage that was cleared and we could immediately put animals on. So things have worked out. You know, it's like it wasn't my dream, but a lot of times we don't get what we want, but it turns out we didn't want what we needed. You know, so
sounds like a Garth Brooks song coming on.
I really appreciate the story because it's a real story of what's going on. And I work with so many clients who just have those rose rim glasses and they just want this perfect, ideal homestead when they should just look at what they can budget for. And I love your story because you just made it your home and you made it work for you. I'm curious though. So during this time, you mentioned that it was a foreclosure and that you had to fix up the home. Did you do it yourself? Or did you hire out?
We did a little bit of both. So the way the loan was like a restoration loan of some sort. So we were able to put in like a large chunk for the remodel.
Like the roof had to be fixed. And then I don't even remember. We definitely hired somebody to paint because it smelled like there was the guy who died in the house before we moved in was a chain smoker and he died of emphysema. So it was like coated with yellow. And so we got painters to come in and coat the walls, take off all the popcorn. Yeah. I mean, everything, because you couldn't even walk in it. And he also had like 10 Rottweilers. And so that stayed in the house. I mean, there was nothing about it that was like palatable. So we had it completely gutted. And there were some things like we tore out the floorboards, but we paid somebody to do the painting and clear out that because otherwise I couldn't breathe. And anyway.
It was like a balance between knowing how to do the work and also
efficiency.
Like, you know, like at that time, like YouTube was not what it is today. Like I would have got myself in trouble because I would have just been YouTubing it all. But back then it was like kind of YouTube. Like, so like we were like, you know, we need hardwood floors like put in this week. Like we don't have a
yeah. Well, we had like a 2-week window too, so it was a really
But yeah, and I will say like we definitely like you were saying with the rose rim glasses, like we definitely said like, okay, this is our budget, and that's why we're getting this house. Like you know, we can't really. While they would have approved us, I think for double what we spent, we were like looking at our income and our payments, we were like, this is the max amount we can have on a payment of a house. Mm-hmm. And I still do not regret that to this day. I mean, that has allowed us to do a lot of things on the property that otherwise we would have just been so strapped that, you know, we wouldn't have been able to do anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. So can you tell us about your farm? I'm curious until we come visit. Like what did you end up buying? How many acres? And then how many animals do you have since you seem to focus on livestock?
So right now we have 15 acres. We bought 10 and a half, and then the other property that adjoins it now is another 5. And we've been through a lot of animals. So we've had pigs.
Well, we moved here because we wanted goats. But we do not want goats.
Yeah. We started with goats and quickly learned that goats had way more time than we did to figure out if a fence worked or not.
Yeah.
So goats got a boot. One day Lacey was like, you know, you don't have to have goats.
It's a revelation.
It's just, what he says, like the good book says, if there's a thorn in your side, pull it out. And I was like, that's so true. And that day I put the goats on Craigslist and we sold them all.
They were gone. Hi.
And then
There hasn't been a moment of remorse about that.
No. we're at this really tough spot now where we're working on a silvo prot, and we have like it just got logged this past fall, and now it's springtime and everything's about to pop out. Like the forest is going to try and come back to forest if we don't do something. And the obvious like solution is goats.
It's not that obvious.
And it's like I have to tell you, like sometimes I'm laying in bed at night thinking I can't have it. That's what goes through my mind is like, no, not goats. Not goats.
Well, I don't know if we talked about this before, but we had sheep for many years. So we went from goats to sheep, and sheep were, so first of all, investment wise, like I from the beginning wanted cows. I was like, we need Dexter cows. That's what we need. But we didn't have $1,000 or $800 to invest on any animal that might die. So we're like, let's start smaller, cheaper. So we went from goats to sheep, and we did love sheep, and we shored them and we ate them, and we loved having them. But we didn't love herding sheep as a family. There are some really horrible memories of. I don't think you can get people angrier than when they, as a family, try to herd sheep. Like it's physically impossible to be angrier than that.
It's like a little like cartoon strip that is like this guy gets to the pearly gates of heaven, and it's like St. Peter's there, and he's like, your life was perfect except when you were working sheep.
Sorry, couldn't get through it.
But so with our sheep, we like selected them genetically. A lot of livestock out there, and this is like something else we kind of talk with like our clients with, is a lot of livestock out there. You can get what's like registered livestock, or you can get like these mutts. And, you know, the registered livestock has been babied, and people spend a lot of money on it. So they want to deworm it and
lots of medication,
treat it because they don't want to lose it. And so it becomes this weak genetic line that's very expensive. And then you have the mutts where people haven't really paid attention to genetics at all, and you have no idea what you're getting.
One time Drew came home with a goat. He was like, this guy was a deal. It's like only 40
That was the first goat I ever bought.
Came with a buddy home with this goat and gets out. And I'm like, there's something off. I was like, this goat has one udder. Like, oh no.
Both me and my friend.
Neither of them noticed.
But in our defense, the spot that we bought the goat from was so sketchy that we were like, just get the goat in the car and let us go. Because
So could you say that you got the goat for 75% off?
Yeah. It felt like it.
She went out, but she was one udder shy of being annoying, that's for sure. Anyways, but herding sheep. They became more and more wild, which was our goal, right? We want wild animals who can thrive in the environment that is North Carolina.
So we continued to select for those genetics, like not having to trim hooves, not having to deworm.
Pregnancies are easy. They birth by themselves. And I mean, it took a long time to get to a place where our herd no longer needed any kind of inputs. We didn't even have to trim hooves. I mean, it was really a beautiful setup, but they were driving us crazy.
But they became like wild deer.
Yes. You couldn't even take a thing of grain out and get them to come to you. There were several ways we could have fixed it, but what we decided was that we needed a herding dog if we really wanted to be successful with sheep. So we got rid of the sheep temporarily, well, forever those sheep, and then we got cows, got a little distracted, but we also got the herding dog, and the herding dog is incredible and is like giving us the confidence that, oh, okay, this is how people do sheep. Yeah. They don't like send all their kids out and be like, you stand over there, that's not what I said.
Now we have this dog that looks at us and he's like, you want me to herd something? I would love to.
I'm on, do it all day, every day.
But the only thing, if somebody's listening to like this part and thinking I need to get a herding dog, is like there does good genetics with dogs, and it does take time. Like it's not like you buy a dog and put it out there and it knows what to do. Like it's training another piece of livestock. So yeah,
it's like investing in equipment or an employee or whatever. But we do have friends that raise them, and so we probably wouldn't have got one if they hadn't talked us into it. But I'm really glad they did, and they do amazing things with animals. So I wouldn't. We've spent a lot on this dog, but he came almost pre-trained in nearly every single way except for herding. But even that, he was had a head start. So if anybody's looking for a herding dog, then let us know.
But
what breed do you have? Is it a border collie?
An Australian Shepherd.
Australian Shepherd. Okay. Now we have a mentor of ours she brought a whistle home to share like how she trains her dog with this whistle. And we're like, how come you don't do that at your place? No, I can't train it. I can't practice it. Oh, they need more room. Yeah. That was interesting. It was almost like the Von Trapp family, you know, the captain.
You mentioned it was really tough herding the sheep along. What kind of breed were you using? Were they like Barbados?
They were Gulf Coast and Jacob. We also had Dorset and Hampshire. So it was kind of like this conglomeration of all of those various generations.
There were certain traits that each one of them brought to the table that we liked, and certain ones that we didn't like, you know, whether they were too docile to be able to figure out like how to leave you alone when you were out there, to like they were too wild or they were too ornery, you know, like it just depended. So we were, you know, there was sort of like it was a play with the livestock to see where do we go and how do we get what we really want.
We started with Dorset because the farm down the road had them, and we were like, oh, these are cool. But they required a lot of inputs.
And the other thing that we've learned is, particularly in this region, because they're not really bred for this zone, right? Like they do great in Ireland, but our summers are a lot different, right? So the Gulf Coast did really, really well. They were very stout and sturdy, and the Jacob seemed to thrive as well. Barbados would be another great example. But we definitely wanted dual purpose, so we did not do any hair sheep.
Yeah. I totally empathize with them because I've had some really trying days chasing after sheep when they're like wrapped up with barbed wire. And I'm just trying to
Yeah.
And we have East Frisian, so they'll get all tied up in their wool.
Oh.
But I will say, I think the most frustrating thing actually, I would say that one of the most frustrating things is actually dealing with chicken electronetting.
Yeah.
That's pretty difficult.
Pulling it through the woods. You haven't still to this day, like when I'm going in through the woods with any of that Premier fencing, I'm like, okay, Drew, let's take a second. We're going to walk through the woods with Premier netting, and this is going to be difficult. Like, let's prepare your inner mind for what's going to happen.
It's not a personal attack.
Yeah. I've had the Premier netting like wrapped up on my shoulder, like all looped up, and carrying it through the woods, and it hit the hot wire that I was like going past. And so it was like instant shock all over my shoulder, head, and back, you know? It's like, that's my fondest memory.
Oh, so your journey went from chickens, pigs, goats, sheep, and cattle. Is that where you're at now?
We're at cattle now. So we don't eat pork, but we raised pigs for a friend over one winter.
Well, you're forgetting the potbelly pigs that we started.
Oh, we did have potbelly.
We
also did not eat them.
Well, we didn't eat them, but we got them to, you know, like do their thing. They till up the ground really well, eat the garbage, you know, it felt like an integral part. But again, the thorn in the side was just too high, because if anyone gets out of a fence more than a goat, it's a pig. And we were just really struggling with them. And we're like, you know, and at the time we had a neighbor who also raised pigs. And a lot of times, you know, they'd be cycling. And so the pigs were just trying to like get to each other all the time. And it was time to just let them go. But anyway.
But then 2 winters ago, we raised pigs for a friend. Mm-hmm. And that experience wasn't as bad, but it just not eating them. We used them for their purpose. And then she took them to be processed. But
well, I say one of the things that we've learned is the netting and the polywire fencing we love them because you can move them, and because most animals are not going to dig under them. Mm-hmm. We have seen ducks do it a lot, but for the most part, the others don't do it. They don't get under it, which is what most of the pigs would go under the fence a lot, those hardwire fences. And the polywire, once they're trained on it, they're pretty smart, and they don't test it unless the power goes out. They do. But I might have chased a pig down the main drive here for a while.
Well, we love talking with you both because I feel like we have a lot in common. We also have the farm, we have the kids, we have the multiple business enterprises that we're trying to figure out. We homeschool, and we value the same things. One of the things that you said was you don't make your income off of the farm, like the farm animals. Mm. So can you tell us more about your business and your web of entrepreneurialism that you have?
Well, Well, so when we moved out here, Drew owned his own security business, sound and security. So he was doing construction work, wiring houses, and providing security for people. I actually started doing network marketing with doTERRA when we were here for about a year. And we were already teaching some on-farm classes, so it kind of jived really easily and well to be able to teach people about plants more. And so that became very successful for us, and we were able to replace his income with that. And so then he came home full time. And then, from there, that's still a piece of it. And then we also offer these consults with folks to help them kind of get a better grasp of what they need. We have a food club that we run and operate. It's not a huge money maker. It's more of a passion, and it builds community, but we love it, and it is growing pretty substantially. And then I feel like I'm missing something, but I don't know what it is.
I don't know the guys.
Did I see Slinger? Right? Yeah. Did I see somewhere that you had a farm stay or something?
Oh, that's the other thing we do. Yeah. Yeah, we do too. We have on our property, we have the schoolhouse you can rent out as a vacation rental. Mm-hmm. And then we also have another vacation rental in the mountains of North Carolina. And we're working towards developing that into a retreat space. But right now it's just a single house.
Okay. Well, we'd love to talk to you more about that.
Yeah.
Good. Just even have another place to just hang out with, and we can come over, take the kids over. During 2020, we did do that. We bought an RV and took mom and dad who lived with us and the kids. And California pretty much shut down. Even when we were traveling, they shut down the restrooms at the rest area stops.
Oh my God.
So we had friends who were going to do a whole country travel, but all of the parks closed. They couldn't, they couldn't go to the parks. It was like
exactly
outside.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it was nice to have the RV, because then we would go visit regenerative farms when things were closed down, and it was good for mom and dad to just have a safe place, for them to travel along with. But yeah, we love visiting other farms. We all kind of, even though we do the same things or we raise the animals, everyone does it a little bit differently.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and so it's always good for the children to see too.
And always something to learn too.
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah. No, I think it's definitely like the most valuable thing that you can do is talk to other people. I mean, you just never know what you don't know, and until you have those conversations, you're not gonna figure it out. So yeah, I think that's definitely critical when people are trying to be successful. You guys have done it so wisely, because I know you chose your property based on, in part, the community that you found there, right? And that's like, I don't think most people are like, it's like they're throwing darts at a map and they're like, yeah, I can find land there, I'm going to go there. And it's like, oh no, you're going to be so lonely, you're going to be so isolated, and there's no success in feeling lonely and isolated, that's for sure.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what we felt in California. So we also did that. We moved from a 1/4 acre, outgrew that. We were there during 2020, and then bought 6 acres and started farming homesteading in Northern California.
Oh, wow.
And so we were about 3 hours away from the Bay Area where we were. And that's when we brought in also our goats and our sheep. And ironically, we were only planning on getting sheep, but the guy who sold it to us threw in 2 goats for our
yeah, I bet he did. $25
a piece.
So I said, why not? That's a steal. But the very next day, we just heard this yelling come in, like something was being,
murdered.
Yeah, harmed. And it was actually the 2 goats screaming out for us. But they ended up becoming pets. I mean, I actually like the goats, but I wouldn't want more because they do test the fencing.
Yeah. And we had, so that those were the apocalyptic buy.
You're like, worst comes to worst, we got.
That's what I say now is there's no such thing as free livestock. It's like we have this opportunity to get a free cow and calf right now, and I'm like, oh, it's such a good deal, but is it a good deal, buddy?
The infrastructure behind it, yeah.
Yeah, it's just have all the right questions. There's just so many unknowns. Like, okay, is it sick? Like, does it butt people? You just don't even know. But
that's true.
That's true.
A lot of it you have to just learn by doing. You can't learn everything off of YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, properties and personalities are so unique and different that you can't apply what one person is doing, even if they're near you 100%. It's just not always going to work. So. And that's what Drew has taught me, the phrase holistic context. And that's a word we use a lot. And it's really about knowing what are your values first and foremost, and not just yours, but your whole family's, and how do you get everyone involved and on the same page? And then how do you get your supportive community on the same page and buy-in essentially to what you're doing? And even yourself, I think a lot of times we just hit the road and we do stuff, but does it really, like, do we really need to plant 18 rows of green beans? Do we need that many? Physically, no, we don't. Feels good to plant the entire seed packet. It sure does. But does that mean that we need all of that? Because then it's just more work at the front end. It's more weeding. It's more dealing with it when it's come ready to harvest it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like, just take a step back and really make sure that it's measured to your yardstick and not some other, arbitrary number. But anyway.
Yeah, we absolutely love hearing about your journey, but how about your children? How did they take it from moving from the city and transitioning to, this property back in 2012?
That's a great question.
So most of them don't know differently. Someone was asking me this the other day. I would say only our oldest remembers the house in the city. The other ones have only known the homestead, I think.
Well,
I don't know if Levi.
They have some vague memories.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we drive by every once in a while.
Yeah. But yeah, so they don't know different. They think that living in a neighborhood would be fantastic, except for our youngest. He's 8 and he plans on living on the farm and
forever.
Living wild. I mean, if you stop by, there's a good chance he's probably just out in the woods wild somewhere. We have to bring him in once a month to bathe him and then send him back out.
He is, I will say, the girls were like that until they reach a certain age, right? Like there's obviously shifts and changes that happen where your social life becomes really, really important.
Yeah.
But I would say our 12-year-old her name is Eliza, and we call her Eliza Doolittle because any animal she can talk to. I mean, literally, they have full on conversations. She can read their minds. And she loves them, and we make fun of her because she always says, "Oh, it's so fluffy," like that's her thing. And she didn't like it at first. Now she's okay with the thing, I think.
But she's got a bottle lamb right now. Mm-hmm. She's got broiler chicks. All 3 dogs love her. The cows love her. I mean, it's wherever she goes, all the animals love her, and she loves them back.
And I know we read this a long time ago somewhere. I think maybe Joel Saladin said it. I don't know exactly where we saw it or heard it, but we recently bought a side-by-side. So we don't have any heavy equipment on our personal property, but the side-by-side is the closest thing. But I will say that the attitudes that we have from them about doing chores is completely and utterly different now that we have the side-by-side. It's like, you got to do your chores. Okay, bye. I don't think that's going to wear off either. They just love the freedom of driving it. They love not having to walk all over the place. If they forget something, no big deal, run back and get it. It's just, I will say that investment, I kind of wish we had made a bit sooner. And I can remember somebody saying, if you want your kids to be involved, you need to let it be fun for them. And, trudging along in the coldest of days is probably not, while it might teach you some important life lessons, it's not fun every day for a mom to start the day with that. It's can that be fun in the beginning? But anyway, so I think, that investment, I kind of wish we'd made a little bit sooner for their sake, just because it does seem to bring.
Although now they really appreciate it.
True. What would your advice be for those tough days? Because I know we have them, and I always try to stay mindful. Our gate swung open too far and it fell off the little latch, and it just wasn't at the best time. It never is. Any of these things never really happen when you are prepared for it to happen. But I try to remind myself in those moments that, hey, this is a good learning moment. But you're fighting. I find myself fighting myself and how I feel to, all right, let's work on this together. But I'm curious, do you have any other mind shifts, or what do you think about, or what do you tell yourself to make it a learning opportunity for the kids during those moments?
I'll say the one thing that Lacey has set up for us is spots that are enjoyable to sit in. Our garden started she was describing of a box, very regimented, how I would build one, very masculine. And she was like, this is not what I want. And so we redid it, and she's like, I want a table where I can drink coffee in the morning and, relax. And so we've kind of worked on over the years, different spots on the property where there's it's enjoyable to just sit there. I think a lot of times, like if you're just focused always on the homestead, just
The functionality.
functionality of the work of like getting things done, and you forget the purpose of like enjoying this life and having a good quality life. But sitting there and like seeing, wow, this is beautiful. Like that's as important as the work that's being done. So I think that helps with the overall mindset of like when a gate falls off the hinges and all the animals get out like that. That's a difficult day. But like there is kind of an element of like how once you recover from that, like how can I make this better in a way? Like maybe I don't want those animals that run away, or maybe I need an animal to herd those animals, or maybe the gate was just set up completely wrong. Like maybe it wasn't like I didn't know that when you install a gate, there's 2 pins on the top and the bottom, right? And the one on the top is supposed to point down, and the one on the bottom is supposed to point up. When I first did the first gate, I just put both of them up. I was like, it's like a hinge. So I put the gate on, and there was a sheep that was coming out of the barn and like squeezed itself under the gate and popped the gate off. And the gate fell off, and all the rest of the sheep came out of the barn. I was like, man, what the heck? And then like I just happened to like see, it was like months later, but I saw a diagram where it was like the top pin's supposed to be pointing down, so that doesn't happen. And that was like, I didn't know, but like, it was something that simple for my case of like, I could have done this and made my life a lot easier.
I think too, like, I feel like you kind of mentioned kids a little bit. My first thought was like, how do I make the kids, how do I help be a good mom in the midst of all of it? Because there are definitely moments where it doesn't go well and we don't behave as better than children, really, right? And so I think one of the key elements, there's a couple. One is it's given us the opportunity to have like these really difficult conversations. Animals die, tragedies happen. I've come out a number of mornings and the kids are bawling because the animals are dead, right? Like and
number of mornings over all of our years, not every morning.
Not every morning. A number of mornings, right? And a kind of every morning now I'm kind of listening when they're coming back. Is that happy chatter or are they crying? Like it's just a way of being. But anyway, so having those conversations about this is a difficult way of life, but how many of your friends get to hold baby lambs and feed them bottles? Well, like they have so many things and freedoms that their other friends don't really have. And even like how late they can wake up at the day and not go to school, right? Like there's just a lot of freedom there. But then also when something is my fault, when I've done something, inappropriately or yelled or Drew has, having that experience where you can come back to your kid and apologize is really, really important. So I think that there's like a certain amount of like, forgiveness we can give to ourselves too. Like I think we think, oh, we should never yell, we should never get upset, we should never do these things, and we should always act like adults. But the truth is nobody ever always acts like an adult. It's just not human nature. So being aware that happens and then having an opportunity to come back and apologize to your child about what happened, I think creates this buy-in from them too, and like both your relationship and what's happening, because they're like, yeah, it's okay when things flop or a tragedy or whatever, but it's how you behave in the moments after that matter most. And then again, trying to do better next time, whether it's solving the problem in a new way or getting an outside opinion. I think another huge part, like bringing it back to community, is having friends whose kids also have similar lifestyles is really important, so they don't feel like they're the weird ones in every particular situation. And then building in reward systems that I don't really believe in allowance. I believe they can build entrepreneurial things. Like I've told them over and over again, if you want to sell eggs, if you want to bake bread, if you want to do this and this and this, like you have the outlets, you can do whatever you want. But even within like, okay, there are some things you just have to do, right? Like the chores are non-negotiable. So doing the chores, and as a result of doing those effectively, you get to have access to, I don't know, an electronic, or we're going to the pool later or whatever, like having these things where they get something out of the situation, I think is really important and valuable too, because they aren't going to just be slave labor.
Well, and I was going to say, like, when we design our systems, we also design it for them.
And with them.
Yeah, and a lot of times with them, now that they've gotten older, but
they'll help build chicken coops.
Like making sure the chicken coop is light enough that they can pull it. Like if it's a chicken tractor, or like when they were smaller, we would install the gate latches lower so that they could easily reach them and open and close them. You know, just like little things that like meant that they were being included in the process and, you know, made their lives easier instead of more difficult. But like that, I think, shows them that they are capable to do things.
And like we set up places to sit for ourselves. We put places like, you know, swings, and there's a zip line and like all these little elements around the property that they get to participate in and they, you know, enjoy in a kid way. We just got a basketball net on the side of the road last week, and that's been like, who knew these kids can't even bounce it because we only have gravel. But
Country kids.
I love that you've designed your life in a way that your home and your farm has been a place of relaxation and enjoyment and entertainment for one another, where you don't have to go on vacation because you have a zip line on your property. But do you ever get a chance to go on vacation as a family? Is something even the kids want, or did they grow up used to kind of? It sounds like it's a lot of fun at the Schoolhouse Life.
Oh, we've been all over the world. We've gone to Israel twice, so I feel like we've done everything for them that they ever will need.
Right?
No, we go on vacations. I think that is another element of that community of like finding people who, if you're going to leave town, can step in and make sure the things that don't all, you know, go to pot. So it's a huge element for us to have that built in, the system of like, if we want to go somewhere, it's possible.
We also design our homestead systems and pasture management and everything also around the idea that like if a farm sitter were to step in, can they do this? And like, is this like, or like we'll scale back, like we're going out of town, so we're going to go into like vacation mode, you know, and like all the animals come close to the house. They're all near water. They're all near food. And, you know, we feed hay to the ruminants during that period. So it's, you know, farm sitters not like doing what we would normally do. They're just keeping everybody alive till we get back. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of how we've designed our farm on the everyday.
I love it.
I mean,
That said, it's the middle of spring, so now we have broilers and we have like baby lamb, and we're not going on vacation anytime soon.
yeah, exactly. We've got the same things. We got our broiler chickens that are going out, and then we do have a bottle-fed baby lamb. That is for
match. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was our last mama that gave birth, and we were really, really hoping that she would take. She didn't, and so we're like, okay, well, we're in for this now. But she has turned out to be super cute, and all of the other sheep have been very skittish, and we put them back in like our zone 3, right? And so now this one is like right in between. It's hard to walk because she like wants to get right in between us. That we think that she's going to be great when she gets older. She's going to train the others to come back and follow us, and that would make things a lot easier for
that would be nice. Yeah,
not having like a herding dog.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, this will be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah,
A good technique for sure. We could have definitely gotten a docile sheep and added it to, but we needed a break. But yeah. 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 You can't beat that experience either. Bottle feeding a lamb for a kid, I think, is just one of the that definitely, I think, will help them understand a little bit more the brevity of child rearing.
Yeah, it is. That's right. Well, thank you so much, Lacey and Drew, for your time and joining us on this podcast. The last question I want to ask you is, what would your suggestions be, and what would your advice be for those new farmers or families or individuals out there who are wanting to get into homesteading or farming? What would you advise them? You seem to work with a lot.
I think I'll answer, and then I'm sure he'll have more to add. But so we always tell people that water and community are the two main things, right? Like if you don't have water, you're going to die. And if you don't have community, you're going to die. It doesn't matter how independent you want to be. Those are the two things that are required. And then I would say that for most people, the struggle that they really have is pausing and observing, patience and observing. And the more time you spend observing your property and also like what you want out of it. And I don't mean watching YouTube or scrolling Instagram. Like that honestly is the opposite of what I mean. What I mean is like really just focusing on what is it that you even want to feel when you're on your property? How do you want to interact with it? And then watching what your property is already doing for you. Because I think most of these places you step into and you immediately start like it's almost like a remodel, right? And everybody wants to tear down the walls and make it like an open concept, right? But it's like, well, slow your roll a minute. We happen to learn this by mistake. Doors are a great thing, and you might want to close the doors so your kids can know to not come in. And we really, like there's some things that you might not even think about unless you pause and really just like download and connect with the property that you have and watch what your natural tendencies are. And then maybe take pictures. I really think that less moving pictures, like less like videos and reels, and more like, okay, even Pinterest, I feel like is a better option, where you start making a Pinterest board of what do you want your farm to look like, so that it's almost like a vision board, right? Where you're really kind of mapping out what do you really want it to feel like? How do you want it to come together? And I think that's a more potent and powerful way of creating a vision that somehow just happens to come together, whether you're like constantly referencing your Pinterest board or not. It's like setting it in your brain. But I that would probably be my number one, is like really just focus on getting that vision super clear. Sometimes I think we do things out of urgency, and it never ends as well as it could if we were just a little more patient.
I would say not just settling for the first property you find, like really, again, like having that idea of what you're looking for, being realistic about it with budget and, labor and all of that. But, really thinking about it. I had someone the other day that messaged me and was like, what do you think about this property? And it was like literally in the intersection of Highway 40 and Highway 85. Like you could see both of them from the house. And they were just like so desperate for a property that they were like,
we'll make it work.
With this work. And it's like, that's going to be a noisy life right there between those two highways, but it's like, so maybe give it a little bit more time and talk to Tim and find something else, right?
There's so much more out there, yeah.
Exactly. And that's the same advice I give actually, is that I want my clients to slow down a little bit and actually think through and be absolutely clear on their goals, just like what you mentioned.
Yeah.
And they have to envision what they're doing, but also don't drag their feet and do analysis paralysis to actually get motivated and take the next step and not be afraid to take that next step.
Yeah.
So to learn more about you guys, is the best way for people to just check you guys out on YouTube at the SchoolHouse Life?
Yeah, we're on all the socials at the SchoolHouse Life.
Yeah.
Awesome. And you're at your website, theschoolhouselife.com as well.
Exactly. Yep. And podcast, The SchoolHouse Life.
And if you're just hearing about Lacey and Drew on our podcast, definitely hop over to their podcast and listen to the interview that we did with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Our part one. This is part two.
Yeah, people have loved listening to that. I've gotten a lot of great feedback.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, Lacey and Drew, for joining us. It's been an honor to talk to you again and to learn more about your business, your farm, your family, and your faith. It's an honor to know you guys, and we really hope to visit your farm soon.
It certainly has. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
Cool. We'll talk later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.